Welcome to the Convey Culture Podcast, where we delve into the vibrant tapestry of generations Alpha, Z, and Millennials. We're here to amplify their voices, break down biases, and shatter stereotypes. Get ready to explore the fascinating world of culture and identity and discover the true impact it has on our lives. Join us on this captivating journey. This is the Convey Culture Podcast. The thing I love most about hosting this podcast is I have the opportunity to dive into different paths, different experiences, hear about what decisions you made that got you on a career journey or the industry you chose in, or how does your culture and identity impact society overall. So I'm very excited today to have Cecily with me. We are going to dive into a little bit about personalities and assessment and understanding how all of that plays into the workplace and into workplace culture. So I'm so excited to have you with me today. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to meet you. Great to be here.
This is going to be a good conversation. I'm looking forward to this one. So every guest gets the first question. And the question is, if you had to introduce yourself to a stranger, now this is a friendly stranger, you want the stranger to know a lot about you. It's a first impression. How would you introduce yourself? What should we know about you?
Yeah, I would introduce myself as a people person. I would also say that I am an athlete. Something that have said about myself professionally for years and years is that I get bored easily. And so I like to do different things every day. I like to do something different every day. And the truth is my work does look different every day, which I consider to be a huge blessing. I like to live very non-traditionally. I'm high energy. I like to laugh. I like to have fun, whatever I'm doing.
That I love when people describe themselves as an athlete, because I think it is a good descriptor of who you are, how you approach work, how you approach life. Like,
yes.
I was a college athlete, but I always say I'm an athlete because I think I can even identify athletes in the workplace. So
yes.
Your work, describe to me a little bit what your work, how you experience it, and how people's personalities come into play there.
Totally. I am a facilitator. So specifically what I do content wise is I facilitate DISC workshops and 5 behaviors workshops for clients that have teams, large and small. I've worked with teams from 10-person teams to 300-person teams, which I would argue actually isn't a team. That would be more of a whole corporate body. But I do workshops with those groups. It starts with an assessment where they learn something about their personality and their style, and we can talk a little bit more about the model. And then I lead a workshop where the individuals who have taken the assessment then can talk about their conflict styles, their communication styles, what motivates them, what stresses them out. The result of these kinds of workshops is always that people are better humans, better employees. It removes barriers to communication, solves conflict frequently, and ultimately makes our clients better places to work. So it's a lot of fun. It's different all the time. Sometimes I'm in person, sometimes I'm virtual. And I find that I learn something new every time.
I find all of that work fascinating because in a lot of the work that I do in DE&I or even in marketing, there are biases that we have just by looking at someone. So we make a lot of assumptions. And so part of the work we do on both ends in DE&I is to break down those assumptions and biases. But then in marketing, in a lot of cases, you're leaning into what someone believes about a group of people. So that's an unfortunate when those things don't overlap in a positive way. But I love that I've worked at a workplace that did those personality assessments. It was nice because when I knew that about someone, no matter what they look like, any of my perceived notions about them, I would go in and be like, okay, I know their communication style. I know how they probably are going to behave in this meeting and how I can engage with them in this meeting. And so I felt like it eliminated a lot of the guesswork when you were navigating someone new in a workplace, but that may not be the intention of it. So what do you think is one of the best ways to leverage those kind of tests or assessments about personalities?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And I find that something I've noticed with our clients is that a lot of time, and time is money. Also, a lot of money is lost in miscommunication or in just difficulty working together. When a team isn't communicating well, or maybe if they're not doing conflict well, for example, because conflict is so important, and conflict is one of those things that I think people understandably have baggage around the term conflict. And so imagine for a second that you're on a team that needs to that needs to make a decision on a solution for a particular project. And if one person gives their idea and 4 other people in the room don't love that idea or can see a lot of pitfalls, but they're afraid to share because they're maybe afraid of the conflict or afraid that attacking the idea might also be equated with attacking the person, then what might happen is that idea that maybe isn't a great idea might get carried forward into a planning stage or even into an execution stage. And the outcome might be abysmal. And imagine what kind of loss might have been averted if the team had given voice to their doubts or given voice to their skepticism and maybe wrestled together and debated. It's like debate storming is a term I like to use because it's not just brainstorming. It's also, you need to debate and have robust debate about the ideas. It's not attacking the person. It's deconstructing the idea. And can we take your idea and make it a little bit better and create something better between all the people? And so ultimately, if you remove those barriers to communication, remove those barriers to conflict at the beginning, then it can pay dividends in the long term where teams can work faster together, they can come to solutions faster, and ultimately they're happier at their workplace because they feel like they can share, they feel like they are on a team with people who know them. And ultimately, that's really the goal. If people are happier in the workplace, then I think we're making a better world.
We are. I mean, there's stats about the impact of belonging in the workplace. And there's something like companies where they're like, when you ask employees and they say like they feel like they belong and this is a place where they feel understood, profitability is 3x. And that was a study by Great Place to Work. So a lot of times when companies think, oh, this is an afterthought for us to put this kind of investment in, it's like, no, it will pay back. You will see that payback in kind of that impact of truly knowing your employees. Are they in the right position? And I love the debate you make up because I think a lot of times you're right. There's a dominant personality or a dominant voice. And everyone's like, I guess they're right. Even though everyone has red flags in the back, like, this is bad, this is bad. So.
Right. Well, and Bianca, one thing you said too about people sticking around for longer is that I have noticed this as well, that when companies invest in the growth of their people, and whether that's providing them with goal setting sessions, which is another workshop that I teach, or even health and wellness programs, things like yoga in the office. A lot of times people will kind of, or outside culture might think that's a little flu, but what we have found is that when individuals feel valued, when they feel that they know their values and they know that their values align with the values of the company, longevity goes up, satisfaction at work goes up, and people really feel like they have found a community of belonging and they don't feel like they need to go somewhere else to find their community of belonging because they find that in the workplace.
I love that. And I love that you say all those points because I do feel that those are not just nice to haves in an organization. Yes, sometimes you see tech companies that have slides in the middle of the office and you're like, come on now, like, is that, but you spend 8 to 9 hours a day at work. So to imagine that your wellness, your whole human happiness should in some way be infused within that organization. Of course, There's some accommodations you can't make, but think about how much time you spend at work and how much that does probably play into your psyche. And if it's somewhere you're not happy, what that does to you long term as well.
Totally.
So one thing I am always fascinated about is biases or preconceived notions that people have. So I've seen personality tests, or if that's not the right, you can totally correct me if that's not, but I've seen different assessments. And then you'll get the numbers back and you see that this company culture skews towards a very particular personality, or they have a really strong. So do you see that? Is there a certain type of career path where you're like, this skews this way? And is there importance in diversifying that? Is there importance of kind of balancing out those personalities?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good insight because it really is true. I have seen that different companies and particularly different industries will really skew toward a particular style. Just to kind of give you an overview of the 4 disc styles that I like to explain it in terms of, it's a quadrant model. So, if you picture like an X and Y axis where there's above the line, below the line, and then left and right. So there's 4 quadrants. quadrants, D, I, S, and C. It goes clockwise. And so the top half of the circle is people who are more fast paced. They're more action oriented. They make decisions quickly. And they're inspired by competition, and the opportunity to be to move quickly, really. And then the bottom half of the circle is more moderate paced, people who are more contemplative, people who like to figure things out, and like, it's the I'll get back to you on this, let me think about it crowd.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's top half, bottom half. And then left half, right half. The left-hand side of the circle is people who are a little bit more skeptical, and they might push back against things. They might say, okay, but what about this? What about that? They might be considered like more disagreeable people from a personality perspective. And they are also more things focused. And so they might be interested in facts, figures. They might really like gadgets. And these are more, people who might relate better with machines or tech and things like that. Then the opposite, the right-hand side of the circle, is people who are a little bit more people-oriented. They're the people. They like to be in groups. They like to listen. They like to feel known. They're a little bit more accepting, and so they might believe something. So less skeptical, more willing to accept someone's input or someone's ideas or observations. And so what happens is you have, top half, bottom half, left half, right half. And so you have the dominant style, D style, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And those four styles certainly, and I always say this, that there are more than four kinds of people in this world. I imagine the people who are listening to this, they're like, well, I feel like I'm a hybrid between those, or like, I might not be like all of the D style people in the world, or I might not be all of the I style people in the world. And that is true. Just like a rainbow or something like that there are many shades of blue, there are many shades of red. There are also many ways to be a D style, many ways to be an I style. And then there's also hybrid styles. But with those four styles, I have noticed that there are industry trends, right? And they're also, what also happens is that within a company, a lot of the like S styles, right? So the steadiness styles might wind up in human resources. They might wind up in customer service, right? The people who are answering the phones that are like, hey, let's work on this together. Can I solve your problems? Can I help you out with this? Support types. Or there's like the conscientiousness types. Those are usually the engineers. They're usually the web programmers. They're like that. Well, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And there is a right way to do it. And if I don't know what the right way is, I'm going to educate myself until I can come back and show you the right way. And I'm going to point it out if you're doing it the wrong way. And so I do notice that within companies, a lot of personalities will kind of gravitate towards certain types of work. And I mean, ultimately, there's beauty in that, because we all have strengths, and it's so important to know what your strengths are and operate within that. And yet also at the same time, when you spend all day around people that are just like you, sometimes we can get into these conversation habits, or these even like thought silos where we forget that there are other people in this world with different styles, and maybe they have different needs for sure. And you might hurt someone's feelings if you push back in a direct manner, as opposed to maybe give them a positive piece of feedback, and also a constructive piece of feedback at the same time. So I find that in these workshops, when I'm bringing people together from across organizations, that's when the real aha moments happen. When people say, "Oh, like my spouse is this way, and you're also this way, so maybe you're the same style, and so you mean to tell me that it hurts you when I say this, because that's what my spouse tells me that too." And it starts to build that empathy, because it's emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness and knowing yourself, but that self-awareness has to lead toward others' awareness, because that's the application of emotional intelligence, is getting outside. It's like the so what to if I am this way, then other people who are also unique, who are also deserving of space in this company and on this planet, have deserve to be spoken to and listened to, and to have their perspective honored in this way.
And I want to like, I'm going to go back and freeze in time what you say about emotional intelligence, because I think that's so true. Like you'll be in a workplace and it's clear someone doesn't have self-awareness and they're like, I'm emotionally intelligent. I'm like, there's no way that's possible because you have no self-awareness to how you're making people in the room feel or how you're coming off or the way your presence sucks the air out of a room because you suddenly change the dynamic. And so I do think when you get the results back, you're faced with your own self and it takes you a minute
Yes.
to adjust. The first time I had one, I was like, what? No. And there was a list of these 20 things bug this person, or here's things you need to consciously work on. And I was almost offended the first time. I'm like, no, I don't. And then I started like sitting with it. And I'm like, oh, I do those 20 things and I
Yes.
really should. So it's a moment of, you do have a moment of self-reflection. You're like, did I answer the questions wrong? I was like, no, this is
Well,
you that you're looking at.
and Bianca, you're not alone in that. Something that I notice when I do this with large and small groups is on the first day, I like to print out their assessments and have them read through it. And on the first day, um, I'll have them read and then reflect and share with the group and share with a partner kind of how they feel about it and what they see and what they agree with and disagree with. And overwhelmingly, the feeling that people will share is, I feel exposed. I feel like this is very truthful, and also I feel vulnerable in reading this, and that's the good stuff right there, is when there's something that holds a mirror up to you in a non-judgmental way. Like these are just your characteristics. This is how you're wired, and there are some really beautiful applications of that, and maybe there are also some blind spots to that. So I'm curious for you. I don't know if you've taken the DISC assessment or if you're familiar with the model, but I'm curious, do you, is there, and if you haven't taken the DISC assessment, maybe there's another one you've
I
taken.
have them right here. I've taken this one. What's it called?
Oh yeah, the color one.
Yeah, so I've taken the color one and then I have my little, and so I've taken it. I was actually going to ask you this because I've taken it when I was very young, early in my career. And then I took it, and earlier in career didn't have kids yet. And then I took it as a mother, and then I took it again later in my career. And the only thing that changed for me was I dialed up more positive energy. Like it seemed like as I got older, I actually became more positive. But my green, which is like your softness and kindness and some of the considering other people, got lower. And I felt like
Okay.
it was a judge on my maternal instinct where I'm like, but I think for me, enthusiasm and caring and being involved is my way. I show kindness and excitement in these things. I'm not like your huggy, I'm not that person.
Yeah.
So I think I go back and read it, but I find the evolution of those tests very interesting to see how I've evolved as a
Yes.
person. Do you see that a lot with generations? Like, I want my Gen Z son to take it because I'm like, where are you now and where will you be in 20 years from now?
Yes. Yeah, I do see slight changes over time, and that's not uncommon. One thing that I will say is that for the most part, your personality style is steady through your life, but it's not going to be like exactly in that same spot from year to year, because as you talked about the profound shift from having kids to becoming a mother. That's probably one of the most meaningful shifts that someone experiences in their life. And so I'm sure that had an impact on the way you answered those questions and other things too. I always tell people, like, sometimes the amount of coffee you've had might impact how you answer a question, or how recently you have experienced conflict at work. Or what job you are in, because a lot of times with these assessments, the results are only as good as the questions they ask, and so a lot of times these assessments might sometimes your answers might shift based on what projects you are working on currently in a particular season, or if you change from one department to the next and you're focusing on things, because those are the things you're thinking about when you're answering the question. So yes, I do sometimes see people shift. One thing that is a trend, and I don't always share this because I never want people of one style to feel like less mature than people of another style, but is that as people progress through life, people tend to move toward the S quadrant, so the steadiness quadrant, which is more contemplative, more moderately paced, and more relationships focused. as people age, as people maybe like become parents or move into more like management and visionary type roles, they're less interested in getting those results fast and being competitive and doing things right. And they're more interested in long-term things like relationships. And so your shift toward positivity, I think, probably relates with that a little bit, that you built that muscle as you became a mother. So and yes, your comment about your son, I do think that all young people they are in this amazing moment. College students are. I also teach at a university, and college students are in this amazing moment where they are both creating themselves and discovering themselves at the same time. And so there's this cycle of, you have the neuroplasticity to change, right? You're not necessarily set in stone. But there's this discovery of what am I like? And also, how does that information land with me? How do I feel about what I'm learning about myself? And what would it take to change? What would it take to change, to kind of like buff off the rough edges and maybe build some areas where I am weak. So I think these kinds of assessments, and there are many of them. Big Five, I'm a big fan of. That's the Big Five personality. DISC is a very workplace applicable one, but there are many such assessments that just give you that self-knowledge and that self-awareness to start to apply as you grow and change through life.
I've seen in these tests, so I've been in a workplace where we use them, but we also noticed there became a bias that people started to develop with the color coding, because it'd be like, oh, you're a yellow, or oh, you're a red, because it was like, that's not your type of person. So it was almost like you'd be in meetings and like, here goes the blue, and they're just going to dive into data all day and no one wants to hear. So it was really interesting to see how much HR had to be like, hey, everybody, maybe we don't do that. This is a tool for this. But it just, human nature is to like find your common type and cluster, I feel like, at times. So do you see that with tests where people are like, I knew you were a this, or I totally can see that in you? Like, how often do you see that in your workshops?
Yes, I see that. And, it's always kind of a delicate dance as a facilitator, because I want people to feel positive about their style. And yet also at the same time, sometimes I have to clear this in the workshops where I'm like, okay, we're not gonna, nobody's gonna make any like eye flags over there. And like, I think the eyes they're starting their team cheer. Like, let's back that off a little bit, because that tendency, I mean, you're so right, that tendency to kind of, like create an in-group preference almost within a personality is I think a natural human instinct to gravitate toward people that you think like and think similar to. But also at the same time, when you say, oh, you're being such a I right now, or you're being so S right now, then it's pigeonholing another person and saying that, well, then you must always behave that way because you are this style. And also sometimes it gives people an excuse to say like, well, I know this is going to come across as really brash and rude, but I'm just a D, and that's just how I am. And that also is just a really yucky application of that information. And so I always try to clear that. And so I'm happy to hear that the HR staff at your workplaces have also cleared that, because it's it can be kind of like the ugly underbelly of these sorts of assessments that you can start to create that preference.
Yeah. So you're also a creative. And I feel like when you're a creative and then you work in something that is very scientific and functional, how does that overlap for you? How do you see those two things intersect, or is there complete differences to the two?
Yeah, it's a good question. My husband describes me as like just creative enough to be a successful creative. And what we mean by that is that a lot of times when you have a creative mind, some of the very creative people will fail to understand how to apply that in the business sense. And so sometimes creative people don't meet deadlines, or have a hard time actually putting like a value on their time or monetizing their work or something like that, or creating, an actual product that the marketplace wants. And so I find that though I am a creative person and have always kind of leaned toward that, I'm just creative enough to be able to, I'm also business oriented enough to be able to like be successful in the marketplace. And so that has been helpful for me to be able to kind of have both sides of that. I do find, and I enjoy working with my clients and with in many capacities, because in addition to DISC assessments and 5 behaviors, I do graphic design, I do website design, and I find that the application, the ability to apply those skills it's a really valuable skill set, because being able to even write a creative piece of copy, text for a website that might be very difficult for someone who's in the weeds of their work in this particular moment, or being able to even take a great photo. Images matter. We are in a moment in time when the internet and social media really makes it essential to have excellent imagery. It's not enough to just like have it, poorly lit or bad design. And one of the things about design that I have learned through being in this career is that every consumer recognizes good design, but doesn't always know how to make it. And so therein lies the value of a designer or a creative thinker, or someone who can communicate a message well through visuals or through words or things like that. And so I find that it's been very helpful, very useful to me to have some creative skills. It applies to every industry that I've been in.
It does. And I've been marketing and sales a long time, and I will say the creatives, like true creatives, were always the ones I'm like, I never want to manage them. And they would ask why, and I'm like, because I feel like I'm breaking their hearts every time I'm like giving feedback or I'm calling their baby ugly. And it is, for me personally, that feels awful, because I'm like, I'm not saying your work isn't pretty. I'm saying the client is not going to interpret it in the way your heart is trying to put out, or the client is trying to speak to an audience that I don't think you're speaking to in this. But it's so the emotional. So even in your point about the different tests and assessment, those tests are super valuable for me personally when I'm trying to communicate with a creative, because I'm like, okay, how do I say this in the way that doesn't crush your spirit? Because you never want to do that to a creative, right? You want them to be full of inspiration ideas, but at the same time, you're in a business. So I think that overlap is so helpful, especially if you're working with marketing, like agencies and brands, to have that crossover perspective.
Well, and so I'm curious, Bianca, I have a thought on this too, but I'm curious, like when the time comes for you to give constructive feedback for something, like, because there is always going to be that moment when maybe somebody really just throws up an air ball, and it's like, okay, well, maybe back to the drawing board. How do you approach that? Do you do I call it the shit sandwich, where you give like the piece of positive, here's something you did well, here's what needs to change, and here's something that you did well too? Or like, what's your method for that?
I love data, especially when it's about a client, because then it's not like I feel like I really want to move I out of it, because then it becomes like a debate between two people. And I'm like, it's actually not a debate. The client said they hated it, but I'm not going to tell you that. So I'm just like, let's go back to data. Here's data on the audience we're trying to reach. And a lot of times in my work, it's like, we're trying to reach a certain demographic and a certain cultural group. And this isn't going to resonate because we missed some element of culture in there. So I try to use data, and then I'm like, the work is beautiful. So this is not a critique of the work. This is a critique of the interpretation and who the audience will be. And so I try to take that approach. I still find there's sensitivities with it, because they worked hard on it. It took a long time. And I always bring back the brief. I'm like, this was what the brief said. Do we feel like this is on brief? And trying to get them to come to their own solution. But I will be honest, I will go home sometimes after having like really shut it down, and then feel so bad, because they look like a kid on Christmas morning when they put their project in front of you. And I'm like, no. And I see the client's face, and my job is to interface for the client. So that part is challenging.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me of in the book Crucial Conversations, there's this really cool, you may have read it. Okay, great. There's this great tip that I took from the book that they talk about how they went into all these companies and they looked for the people who were great at conflict. And these people existed at every level of the organizations. They were leaders, they were team members, they were team leads, they were project organizers. They were all kinds of people at every level. But what they found is that across the board, people who were very good at conflict, for the most part, they demonstrated this one skill, and they call it contrasting. Okay. And it's the skill of being able to, when giving feedback, to be able to say, I do mean this, I don't mean this. And so to be able, and even sometimes use that exact language. And so like, imagine, let's say, you know, if my boss, let's say I'm chronically late, and my boss is confronting me about being chronically late. They might say, Cecily, I don't want you to think I'm unhappy with your work. I am, in fact, very happy with your work. You do excellent work. You meet the deadlines. You go above and beyond with the scope. What I do want is for you to be on time to meetings, because that communicates that you value other people's time and you value my time, and we can get things started on a really good foot. And so when someone says, I don't want, I do want, it kind of creates like, it puts a ceiling on your like displeasure, I guess, when you're in that moment, when you're giving someone constructive feedback. And so I have taken that and applied it to my my relationship with my husband. And also anytime I need to give someone a piece of feedback, it's like, okay, I don't want, I do want. And so that's, if you like that, then
I love that. I don't want to do, I'm going to use that even as a parent, because something like, I love that you're doing, I just don't want you to do this one action.
Yes.
Because you don't want to break their little hearts, where I'm like, no, you know, it tries. And, you know, sometimes what you say becomes a narrative in someone's head. And I'm like, I never want to be a negative affirmation in your head. So how do we say this in a way where you get the growth I'm trying to give you, but not take it in a limiting factor? So I think that's always, especially with, I heard this very interesting thing about Gen Z, and they were saying, and I don't want to typecast them into one group, but they were talking about Gen Alpha and Gen Z. You cannot critique them, or you cannot incentivize them in a way that traditionally like millennials and Gen X want to be incentivized. Like we want to be incentivized by promotions and growth at work. And they said, when you talk to a Gen Z and you're in the workplace, one of the ways to do it is to identify that what matters to them, and what matters to them is anonymity or free time, or saying, the actions you're taking at work mean we have to have additional conversations about this topic, which limits your freedom to be able to leave work early or come or have a more balanced life. And so you had to tie it back to what matters to them. And I think it was interesting generationally how leaders see incentives differently. They're like, oh, pizza parties. And like, I do not care. I just want to go home. And so how to speak differently. And so I've been also trying to intake that in moments where I'm like, what is your personality type, but also like what might be the generational differences of what you want out of life versus what I want.
Man, and that is so powerful, because I think you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but I think most people would be surprised how few adults in this world even know what their values are, even know what their personal core values are. And there was this great study, the Values Arrangement Survey, that they did. That, I mean, a team of researchers started it in the 80s, and they followed people through the decades of their life, continuing to survey them on, what they were most proud of, what they found most meaningful. And they came up with this list of 21 values. You can Google it. But ultimately, life values boiled down. There are many values, but there's basically 21 categories of values: achievement, faith, freedom, wealth, wisdom. There's 21. And the idea that most people, if I showed that list to them, probably wouldn't be able to identify what their top 5 are. They would probably say, oh, I love all of those. And the truth is, all humans value all those things, but we all have to value some more than others. If we all rank ordered the number one as social service, if that was all our number one, then there might be some serious gaps in our society, right? Maybe no one would keep the lights on. Or if we all valued achievement, then maybe there wouldn't be people to like teach 4-year-olds how to draw inside the lines. And so my point is that when people first know their values, and second, know what motivates them toward their values and what fits into that, what serves that value and what doesn't. And then they're able to communicate that to their community around them. It's like, if I, as a manager, know what each and every person on my team values, what their highest value is, then what motivates them is a question that answers itself. I don't need to come with the pizza party, or I don't need to come with the threats or the stick or something like that. Their value creates the carrot that they move toward. And I can speak in that language, and they will hear that in a language that they understand.
That's a powerful tip for leaders. I do think some people tend to use a one size fits all approach. And you're right, there's going to be different motivations and different things that drive people. And I see that in the workplace. I see that with students. I see that across the board. There's very different motivators. And to make an assumption that one carrot works means you lose out on a large percentage of the class. Like, oh, that is
Totally.
me. Well, we've talked a lot about your work. I love the journey behind how you got there. Like, when you open and you're like, identify as an athlete and identify as a creative and I do this work, what got you kind of on the path of all those elements and got you here? Is there any one story that kind of brought you here?
Yeah, it's a good question. We talked about athleticism, and then we moved on to talk about other things. But I do think I appreciate that you also identify as an athlete, and so I think I'll camp out on that for a second. Athletics is not something I do professionally, certainly, but it is as large a piece of my life to be an athlete and to be a person who values sweat and values strength. It is as important to me as my work. And what I mean by that is I spend at least an hour a day on fitness. I am a CrossFitter. I run long distance triathlons. I like to get outside. I like to backpack. And I have not always been this way. I started, through my teen years. I was a soccer player like yourself. You played collegiate soccer, yeah.
I ran track. So
you ran track. Okay. So I was a soccer player. I was on a team. Perfect. There you go. Well, I played soccer, and I found after quitting soccer, after moving on and going to university, I found that I had a bad relationship with fitness. I had a bad relationship with sweat because I really only saw a purpose in sweating if I was chasing a ball or getting, or if there was a scoreboard, or if I was getting yelled at by a coach. And I really had to repair and perhaps even discover a new relationship with fitness, especially as a woman. Women are fed all kinds of stories about how we need to be a particular size or there need to be particular numbers on the scale. And genetically, I'm built to be more muscular. And so the like ideal of the feminine ideal of what the West, modern West thinks that a woman should look like, that I would see in magazines or billboards, is something that I would never fit. And so it gave me for many years, I had a little bit of a crisis with that, feeling like at a loss for not necessarily feeling successful in that regard. And it wasn't until I started weightlifting. Specifically, I train at a CrossFit gym, but I don't think you need to specifically CrossFit in order to discover this. But I remember it was a profound realization in my 20s as a female to start to love my body for what it could do, not how it looked. And to be able to discover what strength looked like and skill, and that I was working toward not numbers on a scale or inches or a jean size. I was working toward getting a pull-up. I was working toward a 200-pound back squat. I was working toward a certain deadlift number or a certain time on a mile, or being able to do a half Ironman. And those sorts of outcome-based input and also output-based goals caused me to really treasure my body for what it could do. And it was a profound shift for me in my 20s. And that's something that I wish I could infuse that in every female, and really anyone who has a complicated relationship with their bodies, because it's not fun to not feel like you're successful physically. And I don't know if you've had an experience like that.
Right. It resonates so much with me because, similar to you, I felt like after college, I was a little bit broken by the idea of fitness because it was so much tied to performance and pain, honestly, pain, and also the yelling and the stress. It was tied to a lot of anxiety, and then it ends and you feel like, there's some failure to the ending of it. Even it doesn't feel good. And so it took me a while to get back to running, back to fitness, back to those things. But to the same thing, I wish I could infuse that to anyone, because I don't even know how to describe the way it feels when you're in really good physical condition. Like, it's just, I think everyone deserves to feel that once in their life, of that feeling of just like, I'm in good shape, not a number on a scale, but that feeling of my body functions as I tell it to, because I'm in this kind of shape, and there's a mind body connection that happens with fitness.
Yes.
And I wish I could gift that to more people. It's not like, oh, lose weight. It's like that feeling of being a high functioning machine. And I also think it infuses how I behave at work. It infuses how I coach or train people, because I think of it like an athlete. And so it definitely resonates. But I agree, there was you don't want it. I want it tied to, I love running and I feel good when I do it. I love weightlifting. I feel strong when I do it. I never want to tie it to, as soon as you start with the scale and the visuals, it ruins the whole aesthetic of fitness, because then you're analyzing arms. Like, I remember growing up and people like, you have arms like Serena Williams. And I'm like, ugh, what? Like, at my time, I felt like, no, I don't want to do that because you're saying I'm buff, and it messed. Like, thank you. I will take it, because I'm 40 and I will take it back up. So it just, I think truly being fit and in shape changes your perspective on your body. You don't see it as a purely just something for someone to look at. You see it as a functioning thing that belongs to you. So that resonates a lot with me. I wish.
I teach yoga also, and I find I was teaching a yoga class yesterday, and one of the things that I talked about was that that the body is a metaphor for so many other things in life. And think of the body as a practice field for the other conflicts that you might experience in life. And so if you are unable to give yourself a break, if you're unable to to take child's pose, for example, in your yoga practice when things are getting difficult, if you are unwilling to give yourself that kind of a break and that kind of margin in a yoga practice, what makes you think that you will be willing to give yourself that kind of margin in life, or in your relationships, or in your performance at work, or even financially, or something like that? So in that way, a physical practice such as yoga, such as running, certainly for yourself, for weightlifting, and for some people it's a martial art, for some people it's dance, but all of these practices, a physical embodied practice, is where we can learn those skills of pursuit, and also boundaries, and that discovery of joy that occurs in the body, that we can then apply to other areas of life. And it must be this way, because we were embodied beings before we were anything else. That was our first identity.
And your first gift is your body. And in any shape, form that comes in, whatever abilities you have, that's your first gift you get. And so I always want that for people. I'm like, it doesn't mean you have to do a sport, but find something that makes your body happy, and it will change your mindset completely. Like, there's something out there for everyone. I once did a workshop, and it was very woo-woo, but I loved it. And you had to sit there and envision what was your perfect workout, or what was your perfect fitness experience. And he's like, the facilitator was like, everyone should be able to do this. And a lot of people had never worked out. No, but envision it. Like, if you could do one thing, and I have like one in my head that's always like my favorite, but he was saying that is an experience that everyone should be able to have. Is like, this is a moment where my body is thanking me for this activity. So what is that? Is it hiking? Is it swimming? Like, what is it for you? And it's not your fitness level. It's just, what is your body thanking you for in that moment? And so I think about that a lot.
What was your ideal workout?
I love a stair workout. Like, the stadium stairs.
All right.
I love it, because it's like, I'm someone who likes goals. I feel like just to the top, up to the top, up to the top. And it burns and it works the whole body. And I like the smell of a track. I like the sound of the feet when it hits the stair. I love it all. So
good.
There's times when I'm like, I have to keep working out. So when I'm 70, I can still do a stair workout. So I just think about that. Like, how do I maintain that?
And you will. I am confident that when you are 70, you will be still doing stadium workouts, because you've set that framework and you have cultivated that love. I think that's the beauty of a long life, is that the longer we do something over and over again, the more we spiritualize it, and the more we connect to it.
Yes. Oh, this is good. See, this is a problem. I could talk to you all day. So we'll get into rapid fire because
Cool.
then you get to know more about you and who you are. So, very first question: if you could work with any brand, who would it be and why?
That would be Patagonia. I live up in Ventura, California, and Patagonia is headquartered here. So when I'm on my long bike rides, I ride past their headquarters on the way back to my house, and I really admire what they stand for as a company, and they're encouraging and enabling people to play in the outdoors. I think they're doing ethical fashion well. Certainly, there are things they could probably be doing better, but I admire their values. Back to the values.
I do too, and their commitment to climate change. Like, what are the least likely 3 words that anyone would use to describe you?
All right.
This
Least
gets
likely
yeah,
would
least
be,
likely.
I would pick traditional. I am not traditional. Brand conscious. I'm not brand conscious. I'm a thrift shopper, and I shop at yard sales, and it's like, I do not care what brand something is. And also indoorsy, because I prefer to be outside. I'm a gardener. I like to get my hands in the dirt, my feet in the water. That's my thing.
You might have the record of the fastest answer to that question ever on the podcast. I'll give you that, because it's my last guest was very emotional about it. I'm like, just least likely. Like, what
love it.
Your favorite content sources? I know you're an outdoorsy person, but favorite content sources?
Yeah, Instagram. I still that's kind of my primary social media. As a photographer, I love quality visuals, and I like to put quality visuals out there. I do have a Netflix account, but fun fact about me, I was raised without TV, and so I never really developed that tendency toward watching things or having a show or something like that. And so I'm more likely to watch a movie or nothing at all.
Oh, I love that though. I think it's okay. I think it's okay to not have your mind consumed with others' ideas. They say when you're creative, you have to protect yourself from that. Like, you can't be overly influenced by it.
Well said.
All right. If you devoted your life to one social impact cause, what would it be?
Yeah, this is not a specific organization or foundation or anything like that, but it is an essential practice of society, and that is mentorship.
Yes.
Mentorship of the next generation. I think young people need more voices than just their parents telling them how to be humans. They need interested and interesting teachers, coaches, youth pastors, boys and girls club directors, people who come alongside them and show them how to be human in this world, how to care for themselves, others, and the planet. I think mentorship is time well spent.
Oh, we fully align there. That is my one. I hear a lot, but that is my one. I think you can push so many buttons in someone's elevator by mentoring them. Just 2 sessions, and you can change their life or open their perspective. So
yes,
I love that. That one, I think people don't realize how important that one is. Okay. You have $300. You have to buy something selfish. This is not, I'm buying something for someone else. This is ridiculously selfish impulse buying. What do you got?
Right. This one's going to surprise you. I would like to buy a palm tree for my garden.
But they're more than $300, aren't they?
It depends on the size of the palm tree.
Last one. Would your 12-year-old self think you're cool?
Yes, very. I think she would be excited to be me.
I love that. That's a good answer. Excited to be you. Because to look back, I always feel like if you can look back at your 12-year-old self and at least say, this person would be pretty excited to see who I am, I think that's the best.
Well, and it's funny that you use the age 12, because excuse me, you wouldn't know this about me, but I remember being 12, and I remember being in 6th grade, because that was the beginning. You're 12 at the beginning of 6th grade, or you turn 12. And I remember that was kind of my first awareness that I was going to grow up and have to move out of my parents' house. And I remember falling asleep at night, and sometimes I would just cry, that I didn't know what my future would be, and I didn't want to move away from home. And so I think if I could go back and talk to 12-year-old me and say, I promise it gets better.
I know. I always think that there's a therapist has an exercise, and I do 12 because I think everyone has some sort of that experience at 12, or it was you had some awareness that you were going to grow up and that you had a dream. It was like, I want to be a firefighter, and you were 5.
Yeah.
It's like, not that you didn't want that at 12, but 12, somehow reality sets in just a little differently for
It
you. And
does.
it feels also unimaginable that you'll be an adult at the same time. Like, it's an
Right.
interesting age for it. So.
Right.
All right. Well, we've done all the questions, all the conversations, but I would love for you to tell everyone where to find you, how to work with you, how to get in touch with you, all the platforms, all the things.
Thank you. Man, I am personally, I'm on Instagram at Cecily Breeding. And that is also my website, by the way. So just cecilybreeding.com. That's where my freelance work is. But the work that I do as a DISC facilitator and 5 behaviors, and then I also lead some other workshops with a company called Begin Development, and it's BEGIN Development. We are an LA-based, mostly women team. We work with companies all over the country and all over the world. We work in person and virtually. We're doing great work in a variety of industries, and that's what we're up to. So Vegan Development, that's on Instagram. You can also find it on LinkedIn, and the website vegandevelopment.com.
Perfect. And I will link that all in the show notes. Cecily, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for joining me today.
It's been an honor. Have a great rest of your day.